So in today's video, I'm going to show you how easy it is to paint this cozy fall storybook illustration. You can follow this project with any brushes you're comfortable with, but I'll put a list of everything I'm using in the description below, right next to the like button. And as you can see, I've already got the sketch placed in here, and this is a free sketch you can have, and all I've done is placed it here at the very top of the layers panel, and then set the transparency mode to multiply so we can kind of see through it. Then I'm going to make sure I'm going to start painting on a blank layer down here. And I'm actually going to start by painting the leaves first. And to do those, I'm going to use the Fineliner Pen and a couple of different kind of fall tones here. And I'm going to fill them out just like this. After that, I'll turn off the sketch just for a minute. And I'm going to use the freehand selection tool and the arrow tool to make a very simple random arrangement like this. And with this arrangement, the important thing I was kind of considering is that there's enough space between the leaves. The next step here is very important. I need to make a copy of these leaves and save it for later. It's really important because I need it to finish up the painting at the end. So I'll make a duplicate of it. I'm going to place it up here and I'm going to turn it off, and just remember not to mess with that for now. And after that, I'm going to go back to the original leaf layer. And I'm going to make a bunch of duplicates and use the arrow tool to kind of move them around. I might kind of resize them a little bit, and I'm going to arrange them into a kind of circular shape. And as you can see here, I managed to do this with 6 different copies, and I'll merge them all together onto one layer. And after that, I'm going to duplicate our kind of collection of leaves here 3 times. And then I'm going to kind of basically just rotate each layer so they're a little bit different. And because there's kind of gaps between the leaves in the arrangement, we can see the other layers showing through. If the layers are kind of lining up and too many similar leaves are showing up right next to each other, you can always mess with the kind of mirroring tools down here, and that'll give you some more options. Another thing you can try doing is using the warp tool, and you can, very gently bend some of these layers and make them fill out the gaps a little bit better. Next, I'm going to give this a dark background. So I'll make a new layer, and I'm going to place it below the 3 leaf layers. I'm going to choose a pretty dark, kind of saturated reddish brown. And for the brush, I'm going to use one of the charcoal brushes. I think the 4B compressed is okay. And I'll just fill out the background like this. And after that, I want to make sure my 3 leaf layers look like they're sort of stacked. And to do that, I'm just going to make them get progressively darker. So the very top one I won't mess with. The second one there, I'll darken it just a little bit. And then the final leaf layer, I'll darken quite a bit. And this looks pretty good. I do think the kind of density of the leaves isn't as, quite as much as I want. There are quite a few gaps here, so you don't have to, but if you want to fix that, you can duplicate one of the leaf layers and then rotate it until it fills in some of those gaps. And I think this finishes up the leaf background. So I'm going to merge all the layers for that onto one so I can keep everything more organized. Next, I'm going to move on and start painting the boy. So I'll turn the sketch back on. I'm going to turn off our leaf background. We'll use it again later on. And I'll make a new layer to start the boy. And I'm going to start by using the abstract round brush and a nice skin tone color. And I'm going to fill out the whole silhouette with a nice loose wash. And then I'll use the eraser brush, which is set to the Fineliner Pen. And I'm going to carefully cut this back to match my sketch. After that, I'm going to follow the same process and do the hair and the shirt, just making sure they're on their own separate layers. And once these main colors are blocked out, I can move on to the face, and I'll make that on its own layer as well. And I'll start with the ears and the nose. So I'm going to use a nice pink tone like this. I'll use the abstract round at a small size, and I'll fill those in. After that, I'll switch to the water blender brush, and I'm going to use it to kind of soften the transition. And then I'll use the eraser brush again to kind of clean it up a little bit. After that, I'll change my brush to the Fineliner Pen, and I'm going to use black and white to fill out the eyes. Now for the mouth, I want to do it in black as well, but if I use this Fineliner Pen, I think it's a little bit too smooth. So I'm going to switch to a scratchier brush in the drawing tab. It's called the Little Pine brush, and just draw the mouth like this. And for the cheeks, I'll switch back to the abstract round and do those in a very light pink tone. And now that the face is finished, I'm going to move on and add some texture to the hair and the shirt. So the shirt is pretty easy. I'm just going to add some stripes to it. So to do that, I'm going to select the shirt layer. I'll make a blank layer above it. I'm going to use a pretty rich reddish brown tone. And I want the stripes to be kind of scratchy. So I think I'll use a drawing brush to do that. I think the gloaming brush is fine. And I'll just do the stripes like this. Now this shirt has sleeves. And one way to kind of give that contrast is to just shift the pattern a little bit. So to do that, I'm going to grab the freehand selection tool, and I'm just going to select the main body of the shirt, leaving the arms separate. And then I can just basically move around this section of the pattern. And all I'm going to do is just shift it down a little bit. And for all these stripes that are going too far, I'm just going to clean them up with the eraser brush. And I want these stripes to be a little bit lighter. So I'm going to lower the opacity of that layer. And once I'm happy with it, I'm going to merge the stripes together with the shirt so they're on one layer. Now this is optional, but I'd also like to give the shirt a collar as well. So to do that, I'm going to switch back to the watercolor brushes. I'll use the Fineliner Pen, and I'll just draw on a collar. And for the texture on the hair, the process is somewhat similar. Again, I'll select the hair layer. I'll make a blank layer above it, and I want the hair to have a scratchy texture, so I'm going to switch back to the Little Pine brush, and I'm just going to use this with a variety of different shades of blonde, and I'm just going to go back and forth and create a very directional hair texture. And I think this hair texture looks pretty good, but maybe it's a little bit too strong. So to fix that, I can just adjust the layer opacity, and once I'm happy with that, I'll pinch and merge it together with the hair layer. And to finish up the boy, the last thing I need to do is add a shadow on the neck. So I'm going to make sure the very bottom layer for the boy is selected. Then I'm going to grab the selection tool, set to freehand. And I'm just going to select the area where I want that shadow to be. Hue, saturation, and brightness. I'm going to darken it just a little bit. I'll saturate it, and I'm going to shift the hue slightly towards purple. After that, I'm going to change my brush back to the watercolor brushes and grab the water blender. And I'm going to use this to smooth the transition at the bottom. And then also a little bit here at the chin area. And once the boy is totally finished, I'm going to open the layers panel and merge all the layers for him together onto one. And now that the boy and the leaf pile are finished, we can move on and bring them together into one illustration. So I'm going to start by turning the leaf pile layer back on. And you can see right away there's kind of a transparency issue where the leaves are showing through the boy. And this is happening because we use the watercolor brushes to paint him, and those have a lot of transparency in them. So to fix that, I'm going to select the layer with the boy. I'll make a duplicate of it. I'll turn off the duplicate and select the original. Then I'll go to my hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'll raise the brightness to max. And it creates basically a white version of the boy. And I'm going to create a few duplicates of that one. I think 3 is enough. That blocks out the leaves pretty well. And then if I switch on the top layer here with the boy, the one that we didn't brighten, you can see it exactly lines up with those white layers, and that kind of covers up the leaves in the background. And since I'm happy with how that looks, I'm going to merge all those onto one layer. The next thing I want to do is make a sort of shadow that's behind the boy's head being cast on the leaves. So I'm going to make a blank layer that's underneath the boy and above the leaves. I'm going to use a pretty dark reddish brown color. And for the brush, I want a very scratchy brush. So I'm going to go back to the charcoals and use the 4B compressed. And at a medium size, I'm going to kind of paint this kind of around the boy's head. And I think that looks pretty good. The next thing I'm going to do is add a bunch of leaves kind of covering this area, and maybe some kind of randomly placed around his head. So if you remember at the beginning of this video, we kind of saved a layer of leaves just up here. So I'm going to drag it back down below the paper texture, and we're going to be working on this and basically kind of rearranging these leaves. But I think they're a little bit hard to see because they blend in with the leaf pile in the background. So I'm going to change the hue a little bit, just temporarily so they stand out. There we go. And then after I make the arrangements, we can shift the hue back so they blend in again. Now 4 leaves might not be enough to cover up all these areas, so I'm going to make a couple of duplicates just in case. But I'll turn them off for now and just work on one layer at a time. And I'm just going to use the selection tool set to freehand. I'm going to select each leaf and then move it into position using the arrow tool. And this arrangement here definitely took a bit of time, but I think it turned out pretty good. Now you can see I did it all actually on these 4 different layers. So I'm going to merge them all together onto one. These are just the new leaves we've placed on top. And then I'm going to shift the hue back to normal so they blend in. There we go. And finally, the last step here is I'm going to add some shadows of the leaves being cast on the boy's shirt. So I'm going to make sure the layer with the boy is selected. I'm going to grab the selection tool set to freehand, and I'm just going to make an interesting selection like this. I'll circle back, and I'll darken it just a little bit. Then I'll do it one more time, trying to make some shadows in a different place. And I'll darken it just a little bit as well. And just like that, our illustration is all done. While I was painting this, I couldn't help but think how the leaf background might work really well for pet portraits. I have a video about painting cat portraits from photos that you could watch next. And I think combining these 2 projects could make for a really unique personalized listing that you could offer on your Etsy store.